8:39 a.m. Quad Cities at News Talk 1420 WOC with Dan and Dan. We're joined in the studio by new Davenport Mayor Frank Klipsch. Are you used to being called Mr. Mayor yet, or when somebody says mayor, do you turn around and look for the mayor?
That's exactly right. You look around all over you mean me? Or,
yeah,
so
right.
They throw the Frank in, I have a chance, but if they call me mayor, I'm still kind of working through that a little bit.
Let's talk about some of the issues here that you've been facing. You've been mayor for 23 days, I think.
That's about right, I think. Yeah, that sounds good.
It's been a lot of interest.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Right. Is it fun so far?
It has been fun. It really has.
A lot of interest in those 5-person meetings that they call the briefings, that the aldermen, where they meet in groups of 5, which is just one short of the number that would trigger the open meetings rules. You said you would strive for openness, transparency. I think a lot of people look at those and say, what's going on in those meetings? There's something, because when you get to the city council meeting, everything is so smooth, there's no debate, and I think people think that the debate generally is happening in those meetings. So what do you, and first of all, I don't even know if as mayor, if you even have the authority to say, okay, those go away. I don't know that you do.
Well, it's a great question. It is a team decision. I think what really goes on, I would more preferably, I think briefings is a good idea. It's where we do our homework. It's not there's no decisions made, there are no votes taken. All the cities around us do the same thing. I think some of them do them in groups of 2 and 3 and 1, wherever they can get people together. Fortunately, we can get a few more people together at certain times. We have some people that are working full-time beyond their council and elected office positions. So they might be spending more time, and it's harder to get them there at the same time as others. And we got a number have wife and kids or husbands and kids, and we try to be respectful of the time. So doing it at a little closer groups made some sense. So, and it really is doing the homework. We are going to be doing more things, and that's an evolving process. I mentioned that, but you're right. It's been 21 days.
Right.
So we have a lot to learn. There's 3 new aldermen. I'm new in the job. So we're getting together in these briefings to do our homework and really learn about all the details. And it's amazing, all the things that are going on.
Do you think you understand why people look at that and say, "Hey, what if it's just homework and if it's just general information, then why can't people see see the same information that you guys are seeing?"
Well, if you think about all the organizations, I would assume here at the station you have staff meetings where you get together, where you're bouncing ideas around, and some of it is information like personnel-related issues or contractual issues that really aren't public information yet. We're working on the details. And how do you move people in and out of meetings based on those topics coming up is part of it. Some of it is just the boring stuff, But I think the question is, I think most organizations, and I've heard a lot of people just the opposite come to me and say, what's the deal? We do the same thing in every one of our businesses. We get together and do information, and we have time to share ideas and bounce ideas around, and that's basically all it is. But I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned earlier about becoming more transparent and doing other things. Well, we had the first work session the other night. We're going to be doing more of those, where we do those. Once we've done our homework, then we'll open up and have a real debate about what those things are. I don't think it's productive to sit down and learn about all the intricacies necessarily of how we can have a good debate and a good discussion first. So we're doing that in our briefings, but then we'll get together and do those other sessions. We've already scheduled the first one. I think it's March 3rd. We're going to have city council outside of city council chambers, bring it out into the public. We're starting a Citizens Academy. We're inviting people to learn about the city and get on the inside of all the things that we're doing, how everything works. And there may be an evolution in those type of meetings that we have as well. One simple thing let's just break up and have smaller groups. Well, is that really, then nobody says anything. If I meet with a couple people and somebody else and we have 5 or 6 meetings instead of 2,
right,
it may look like, well, there's 2 right in a row and that looks like there's something really happening. It's just more efficiency. And I think on one hand, people say, why can't the government be more efficient? We're trying to be more efficient and do those things in a quick manner to get the information out. But this is not a secret meeting where we're deciding on anything. It really is, in fact, just getting together, doing our homework, and preparing to have the meetings in the public that we need to have. And, not many times people say, geez, those meetings, you're just too darn efficient. Darn it, I want a longer meeting with more stuff in here.
Right.
Well, we'd say everything that's voted on is detailed. And one thing I've asked Alderman Rawson from the 5th Ward is a new committee that we're establishing about community engagement and communication. So one of the things I see happening is all the decisions that are made, she's going to be looking at from another perspective how the public's going to see these decisions and how we, in fact, can detail all the steps taken to get us to that decision. So we'll be open and transparent. But it's a lot of work. So those briefing sessions, which I'd much rather call them that, is just get us the information we need with a lot of new people, make sure we're all understanding what the issues are, and then we can explain those and talk about them more in the public. And we're looking at ways to do that.
Let's talk about the budget.
Okay, let's talk
welcome
about
to the
that,
job,
Dan.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Well, and good morning to you, Dan. And Dan, you didn't even ask me about how I was doing or anything. It was just, bam, we went to the meetings and now we're going to the budget. Well, let's talk about that, Dan.
You've got some money issues, and I was impressed because you right away took a look at cutting everything by about 2% to try to match up. And I thought, well, you know what? Finally, we get somebody in there saying, "Look, let's be fiscally responsible. Let's try to right the ship." And then all of a sudden, we get this thing about a user fee.
Let me address that, Nate.
Yeah.
I think it's important. One of the things that comes up here is that's one of those things that may be an issue. Nobody ever, the council did not say, let's do a user fee. What are the options? I think is important. And one of those things came up as a lot of cities around us are using license fees. We never decided on anything. It was one of those things. What can we do? Well, we can, reduce salaries here. We can increase here. How can we increase and how can we decrease? So it was kind of premature to just say, what about this? We could say a lot of things, that are possibilities that, if taken out of context, look like there's a movement to do something. So there's nothing planned at this point to do anything like that. Again, we wouldn't have that discussion without having it publicly. The issue is, and understand what the details are. So I think the whole question is, in fact, a way of generating more revenue. But we're looking at this point, how do we reduce cost. But I think it's important to understand, as the rollback in the property taxes have come about, as the possibility of multi-residential rebates are coming or rollbacks coming from the state, and in fact, a fairly flat tax base, we haven't raised taxes. You got to realize that costs go up every year, so it creates, which I've learned a new term, decrement. My world is always a deficit, but it's a decrement. We're anticipating in this year, if all things stay the same with taxes and everything as they are, which we're doing, and with expenses basically on collective bargaining and other items related to police, fire, and the other union activities and the other city government, cost will go up about 2.5%, and revenue will go up about 5.5%, 0.5%. Creates about $1 million deficit. Mm-hmm. Don't do anything different, but we have $1 million shortfall. So the idea is we're looking at going internally and trying to find ways of cutting that, but that means we got to make sure we maintain those core city services, and how do we get as streamlined as we possibly can. That can't go on year after year after year, because it's happening almost annually. That increase goes up, and the increase in expense goes up, but the taxes, we're not looking at raising taxes at this point. Well, if you have that happening, either you start cutting more and more and more, and we don't want to jeopardize city services to what people really want. So we're balancing that. One thing I did mention in one of the early meetings, I'm calling for a blue ribbon committee to take a look, for instance, at all public safety. How do we do it more efficiently? Can we do it more in collaboration with other amenity agencies and organizations and governments around us? All those types of things. And that's part of the thing. How do we be more efficient and not necessarily raise taxes? But we have to look at what are the options. And those are one of the things we'll look at. There
has to be some programs out there. You look at the Davenport Now program, for example. I know that it didn't seem that the council was really, at least what I've read. I wasn't at the meeting, but it didn't seem that many people were excited about keeping that program, or at least keeping the Davenport Now program the way it is. And that's the program that basically gives tax rebates back to people who build in Davenport or rehab houses in Davenport. I mean, people will look at programs like that and say, before we start talking about cutting police and fire, maybe some of those programs are where we need to look at.
Yeah, but that's a good point. But I think that's another one of those 6 of one, half dozen other kind of issues. Because if we are, in fact, sending people in the inner city or central city where it's difficult to get construction happening, I think that's a great idea. Where the discussion will be, are there areas outside of the central city in parts of the community that may have new development regardless of that incentive?
Right.
So it's not I don't think there's a discussion or a consensus anyway on eliminating the program, but how do we focus it in areas more importantly? I just talked with a group of developers yesterday, and they were saying there's parts of Davenport in some of those more nicer, quote-unquote, areas or more desirable areas. But if we don't, we have to make sure that if people are looking to move to another city, maybe right around us, how do we incent them to take this land and available and use it here? So I think it's a more complicated issue, but you're right. If, in fact, that investment creates more property taxpayers and more tax base, then maybe it's a good use of money, but that's one of the things we're looking at. But you're right. If it's just a matter of we don't want to give things away when we're having to cut things on the other side, the things that we incent people to do ought to have a return on investment and, in fact, create more tax base that relieves issues down the road.
I was watching the video for the Davenport Now program, just learning about it, and I thought it was interesting. The houses, have you seen the video, the promo video they have? The houses, I mean, those pretty nice, brand new houses in some pretty nice neighborhoods where they're talking to the people, and they were even interviewing a couple people. One said, oh, we were going to pick Davenport anyway, but hey, this is just great right on top. And I'm like, well, that's probably not what the program, if you were to pick Davenport anyway, that's probably not what the program was intended to do.
That's exactly right. I think that's what we need to look into. Where's the best way? And any time we do any of these incentives, does it create more jobs, more tax base? And would this happen without those incentives? So I think that goes for a lot of different incentives that the city uses and can use to make things happen. Does it have that long-term benefit and payback and return on that investment?
We're kind of getting close to the end of time here, but since becoming mayor, is there anything that has just completely surprised you I was not expecting that?
Well, I love meeting people. I like going out, and I knew that was going to be part of it. I knew in advance that there are 23 boards, commissions, and committees that I appoint people to. I knew all of that. But there's a tremendous amount of other things, but as mayor, that you represent the city on. Bi-State Regional Commission, the Scott Emergency Communication System, there's so many other of those, the Medic Board. I think they was surprised that the amount of work that your city officials and elected officials do, and many of my colleagues are doing the same thing, the elected officials. So there's a lot that is expected of us, and that's another reason we started this whole conversation with how do we use that time as efficiently as possible. Literally, my day is one right after the other. I leave here and have meetings throughout the whole day, all the way until about 7 o'clock tonight. I knew what that's going to be, but I think there's also a couple of our aldermen that have young families. So I want to make sure that we use their time as efficiently as possible, but they need to do their homework and be up to speed. So how do we bring that all together to make this happen? So that was probably the differences. But I'm excited. Everybody, I realized, boy, there's a lot of people that want to meet me. So that's kind of fun. And I realized it's not just my personality. So
well, I'm glad we were on the list.
That's great. Well, I'm glad we had a chance to do it. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Well, right. I was afraid there for a moment the way you were talking about your schedule. You were going to be asking for a raise already, and you've only been on a job.
I will. You can double what you paid me today, which is won't be nothing. That's right.
Give you 2 cups of coffee.
That's right.
Davenport Mayor Frank Klipsch, it's good to meet you, and thanks for stopping by. And yeah, we'll have you back soon. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much,
It
Dan.
is 8:51. Dan and Dan here at AM Quad Cities.